Welcome to Module 2, Design and Development. In this module, you will learn the different phases of the design process, the control of design changes, and the requirements of a design file. Note that there will be a quiz at the end of this module. You must score at least an 80% to pass, and the quiz can be retaken as many times as needed. Design and Development, or D&D, is its own unique process that follows the PDCA cycle, or the Plan, Do, Check, Act cycle that was previously discussed in Module 1. It is described in Clause 7.3 of ISO 1345. This is the only clause that can be excluded and a written justification is needed. Clause 7.3.1 defines the requirement for a documented design and control procedure. The FDA also has requirements for design controls per Part 820.30. We will now discuss the different phases of the design and development process. The first stage is planning. A part of design and development planning is determining the stages and controls for the product design and development. This is referenced in Clause 7.3.2. A design and development plan should be created for each new project and should be updated as the project progresses. The design plan should contain the design and development stages, the reviews needed at each stage, the verification, validation, and design transfer activities that are needed at each stage, the responsibilities and authorities, the methods to ensure traceability between design inputs and outputs, and the resources needed, including any necessary competence of personnel. The next phase is documenting design inputs. All the requirements essential to the product or service should be determined. These requirements become design inputs or DIs. Clause 7.3.3 lists the type of inputs that should be included. These include functional, performance, usability, and safety requirements, regulatory requirements, applicable outputs of risk management, information derived from previous designs, or other requirements essential for the design and development. The customer's functional specifications determined at Clause 7.2.1 also become inputs. This is a part of the plan stage of the PDCA cycle. The next phase is documenting design outputs. Design outputs must meet the input requirements and must be adequate for subsequent processes. An analysis must be made showing that all inputs have been addressed by outputs. Per Clause 7.3.4, outputs must meet the input requirements, provide appropriate information for purchasing, production, and service provision, contain or reference product acceptance criteria, and specify the characteristics of the product that are essential for its safe and proper use. This is a part of the Do stage of the PDCA cycle. The next phase is conducting design reviews. Design reviews must be performed in accordance with the design plan, which are typically in between each design phase. At the design reviews, the design team must evaluate the ability of the design to meet requirements and propose necessary actions. This is referenced in Clause 7.3.5. Records of these reviews must be maintained. Participants in such reviews includes representatives of the functions concerned with the design and development stage being reviewed, as well as other specialist personnel. This is a part of the check stage of the PDCA cycle. The next phases are design verification and validation. Design verification and validation must be performed in accordance with the design plan. Verification ensures that the design outputs have met input requirements. Design validation ensures that the resulting product meets requirements for intended use. Documented verification and validation plans with acceptance criteria must be created in advance. If applicable, the team must verify that specifications have been met to connect with other devices and that requirements for intended use have been met when connected with other devices, per clauses 7.3.6 and 7.3.7 respectively. Validation should be conducted on representative products, such as initial production unit batches or equivalents, and clinical evaluation should be performed in accordance with any regulatory requirements. These are part of the check stage of the PDCA cycle. Additional details regarding the differences between product verification and validation can be found in the Design Verification versus Validation Guidance in the Additional RUC Guidance Documents folder. The next phase is design transfer. The design and development procedure must also document requirements for transferring design outputs to manufacturing. During design transfer, outputs are verified as suitable for manufacturing, and production capability can meet product requirements. Per Clause 7.3.8, results and conclusions of the design transfer shall be recorded. This is also part of the check stage of the PDCA cycle. We will now discuss design change control. The control of design changes must be documented in a procedure. Design changes typically are done once the design is frozen and occur during verification validation. Before implementation, changes shall be reviewed, verified, validated, and approved with documentation of each. The effect of changes on parts and products in process or already delivered should also be evaluated. Changes can introduce risk, so a documented risk assessment shall accompany all changes. Per Clause 7.3.9, records of review of changes and any necessary actions must be maintained. This is a part of the ACT stage of the PDCA cycle. This figure shows a visual of how each of the design phases connect. To recap, we first start with user needs that turn into design inputs. Inputs are then processed and are turned into design outputs. Outputs are then verified and validated, and that is ultimately how we get our medical device. Design reviews happen at each of these phases. We will now discuss design files and associated records. A design and development file for each medical device type or family must be maintained. The file can either contain or reference records. The compilation of these records is how to show conformity to design and development requirements. There are a few different types of design files that are relevant: a design history file, device master record, and device history record. We will discuss each of these in more detail. A design history file, or DHF, is a collection of documents that describe the design and development activities of a medical device. Its purpose is to demonstrate that the device was developed using the design control process needed to meet FDA requirements. A separate design file for each type of device developed is needed. This is an FDA requirement per Part 820.30. The following documents typically go in a DHF: user needs, design inputs, outputs, design VeriVal protocols and reports, all associated design reviews, and all materials relevant to design transfer into manufacturing. Next, we have the Device Master Record, or DMR. Everything you need to know to build and test the device is contained here. This is an FDA requirement per Part 820.181. The following information should be included in a DMR: device specifications, product process specifications, quality assurance procedures and specifications, packaging and labeling specifications, and installation, maintenance, and servicing procedures and methods. Some parts of this process will sound familiar to what's compiled in a DHF. Items in the DHF can be referenced in the DMR. They do not need to be duplicated. The difference between the DHF and the DMR is the first letter: design versus device. The DHF is focused on capturing the history of the design and ensuring that it was done according to FDA regulation. The DMR is focused on building the device and ensuring that all necessary items are included to build, test, package, and service it. Lastly, we have a device history record, or DHR. Everything done to make the device is contained here. A separate DHR for each type of device developed is needed. This is a requirement for the FDA per Part 820.184. The following information should be included in a DHR: the date of manufacture, the quantity manufactured, the quantity released for distribution, The acceptance records, which demonstrate the device is manufactured in accordance with the DMR, the primary identification label and labeling used for each production unit, and any UDI or Universal Product Code or any other device identifications and controls used. The figure below provides an overview of the different types of design files we just discussed. Think of each of these files like recipes. The DHF is how you develop the recipe. The DMR is the recipe itself and how to make the dish. And the DHR is how the recipe turned out. Once design and development files have been established, the organization essentially has the foundation of what goes into a 510(k) submission and a technical file, as shown in the figure. The 510(k) submission is for the FDA, and the technical file is for the European markets. We will discuss both of these at high level shortly. The 510(k) is the pre-submission form for all devices that are Class 2 or higher on the U.S. market. The FDA lays out the requirements for the 510(k) in Part 807.92. The 510(k) demonstrates to the FDA that your product is safe and effective for its intended use. The submission contains about 20 different sections for things like indications for use, device description, performance, and more. Design controls will feed into many of these sections. Organizations should be at least through design verification in order to submit a 510(k). This is how they will establish equivalence. This means that they can compare their product to another product on the device that has already received 510(k) clearance. A technical file is essentially a European version of the 510(k). It is required in order to sell devices in the European member states. The technical file demonstrates how the product conforms to applicable European Union medical device regulations, also known as EU MDR. Organizations should be through verification and validation to put together a technical file. One big difference with a technical file versus a 510(k) submission is the need to provide a clinical evaluation report. The technical file also goes through continual updates and reviews by notified bodies, where the 510(k) is just reviewed once. While design validation is proof that the product meets the needs of the end user, clinical evaluation is similar yet different. A clinical evaluation report addresses the product's clinical investigation, risk, and outlines any post-market clinical follow-up, or PMCF, that may be needed. It is comparable to and serves a similar purpose to design validation. 510(k) and technical file submissions will be discussed in more detail in Module 9. All manufacturers of Class 2 and 3 devices and select Class 1 devices are required to follow the design controls per Part 820.30. The holder of a 510(k) must have design control documentation available for the FDA during a site inspection. Any changes to the device specifications or manufacturing processes must be made in accordance with Part 820 and may be subject to a new 510(k). We have now reached the end of this module. Be sure to review all applicable procedure and form templates that Rook has related to the requirements listed in this module. When preparing documents using these templates for our clients, be sure to customize them to what the organization actually engages in. Before moving to the next module, take the Module 2 quiz. You must score at least an 80% to pass, and the quiz may be retaken as many times as needed.